Let me introduce the audience to Ryan once again. Ryan is the CEO, co-founder, and engineering director of Pyroscope. And whoever is working with the observability platform might know that Pyroscope is a continuous profiling tool, and it's an open source tool. And Ryan is running this platform for more than 2.5 years, right?
Yep. That's all correct. Me and my co-founder Dimitri started it about 2.5 years ago. We had worked together at a previous company where we were using profiling tools along with other, logs, metrics, things like that. But we just didn't feel like the profiling tooling was quite where we thought it should be, and we got a lot of value from it. And so we decided to go ahead and turn something that we had sort of hacked together at a previous company into a open source project and see if we could grow it and get more people to use it. And luckily a lot of other people have found the same value that we did, and profiling has grown both with Pyroscope and just profiling in the cloud native world has grown too.
Yeah, right. So I would like to tell the audience that we want to thank Ryan once again for coming on a weekend for this discussion. And also, I came in touch with Ryan via a Slack conversation because what my work is, I work with observability platforms closely, and I work with different open source projects and try out what is the best for melt data or for profiling. And whenever you go and search something regarding profiling on Google, then the first thing you will come up is Pyroscope only. So we'll get to know about technicalities of Pyroscope, how Ryan get into profiling, all those from the very start. So let's get to the first question. I want to ask Ryan that I went through your LinkedIn profile, and not only there are a lot of technical companies, but I also come across a long profile where you have worked as a Google Ed Grant intern and also a marketing intern. So you have gone through a lot of different experiences, and then you came into core software development. So how was your journey? How did you decide to come into software development and then into profiling?
Yeah, it has definitely been a long, winding journey. I started off. I'm from Indiana originally, and so I went to school for business out in Indiana University. And so a lot of the internships and work experiences I had early on were business related. So I was sort of on the business side over at Google. I did some like consulting stuff with PwC. I did investment banking with Goldman Sachs. But with all of those, it was kind of, I was always on the business side of something where I was kind of more interested in the technical side. And so I decided after I graduated to not go the business route, and instead, I did a coding boot camp, Hack Reactor, and learned how to code. Ended up moving out to the Bay Area to find a job as a software engineer. And I found my first job at a at a like mobile app analytics company called Sensor Tower, and that's where I met my current co-founder. That's where I started working as a software engineer. Actually, my very first project was doing some stuff with setting up some Grafana dashboards, ironically, and so it was kind of funny to see it all come full circle when me and my co-founder ended up at Grafana. That was kind of the path to get back to software. And I was at Sensor Tower for a while. I worked for a mobile advertising company, AppLovin, for their game studio called Lion Studios for a while. And then kind of during pandemic, we kind of had the idea to try and grow Pyroscope, as I said a little bit earlier, and we went ahead and went for it.
Right.
We did Y Combinator as well. I guess, I would add, we also did Y Combinator, which was very helpful in, kind of teaching us how to go from an open source project into a business. Basically through all that, we kind of got the ball rolling, got some momentum, and then haven't really stopped since.
Right. So you started like only two people only, and then you grown into a team. Like I would say, there are 80 to 90 contributors right now into Pyroscope. So gradually you moved into becoming a team leader, and then there is becoming an engineering director. So how was the experience, and what new skill set you had to learn to grow into this bigger team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think yeah, with open source, I mean, that's like one of the things that's hard to grasp, when you start your first open source project, really, is like how, people seemingly kind of come out of nowhere and sort of rally around a cause or an initiative. And so, we didn't realize until we started Pyroscope that, we weren't the only ones who wanted better profiling tooling. And so, yeah, I mean, it really wasn't, I don't know if there was like I guess the biggest particular skill set that we had to learn was just how to sort of, both get feedback from the community, which is kind of what, how you and I started talking as well, and you giving us some feedback, but getting feedback from the community and then sort of setting up our project in a way where it was easy for people to, come in out of, without all of the context, get up to speed and be able to contribute something meaningful, without, yeah, obviously without having worked on the project before a lot of times, or, especially when the project is moving along really quickly. And so, I would say that was probably the biggest skill. And then, yeah, and then after that, it's kind of just finding a way to manage getting all the PRs merged and making sure, people feel, appreciated for the work that they were contributing and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, so it is like really tough to get this many people to have a common mindset, because as many people joins the project, it might get into different directions, but you had a clear goal in mind, I would say, and that's why you guys have got a great success. I saw your video that you sent to me, the one with the Hendrik, the Is It Observable channel. So that gives a lot of
Uh-huh.
idea about how to install Pyroscope into different infrastructures and what different languages you support. I will also add that link to this particular video. But as you guys are growing so fast, so in the last 5 months you have done so much more. So we would like to get the people updated about what new Pyroscope is giving to people. So the first thing I would ask you is, why should people care about profiling or even observability? Because many corporates there are existing that do not have an observability pipeline at all. So what would you say to them, and why and how they can use the Pyroscope platform? How that is relevant?
Yeah. So why should people use profiling and observe? So, I mean, yeah, basically I mean, observability itself is just something that at this point, I would say most, companies should have that mindset of being able to, ask questions of the various, logs, metrics, traces, and be able to, answer, what's happening, being able to find issues, being able to prevent issues before they happen. So, I think that a lot of people are really on board for at this point because, as the sort of like cloud native landscape and, software landscape expands, like, yeah, it's just, too hard to, keep tabs on if you don't have some sort of solution for being able to, understand your data. For profiling specifically, I would say that the benefit and the reason for profiling, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of them. But yeah, I mean, what we've seen is that there's kind of like three main use cases that really sort of like bubble up to the top. One is obviously for like cost cutting. So, when you're using profiling, basically what you're getting is an output that shows you a breakdown based on lines of code, which like resource is being consumed. And so, sometimes that's memory resources, sometimes that's compute resources, sometimes that's, other types of resources. But whatever it is, eventually that stuff correlates into how much money you're spending on compute resources and memory resources for your infrastructure that you're running. And so using profiling, you can kind of have a much more like sophisticated way of understanding your kind of cost structure and making sure that you're getting sort of the return on investment on what you're doing. So, for example, one way we've seen a lot of people use profiling is to actually monitor their logs, metrics, and traces and understand like how much resources are they spending on these other signals, and does that match the return on investment that they're hoping to get from those signals. So, cost cutting is one. For a lot of companies, there's like a revenue generation aspect that's tied to latency. So, one example we often give is for like rideshare companies. If you are waiting really long for a car to come pick you up or something, you could easily switch to, like if you're using Uber, you could switch to Lyft or whatever the versions of competing rideshare companies are, wherever, whoever's listening to this is. But yeah, and so for that, you can use profiling to say, okay, if someone was waiting 10 seconds to find, some car, how can we get that down to 5 seconds? Because in those last 5 seconds, you might lose, millions of dollars in revenue and people, leaving your platform. And so, yeah, so revenue generation is another one. And then obviously like incident prevention and incident resolution, being able to understand, something ran out of memory and crashed or something along those lines. You can then use profiling to kind of go back in time and understand, exactly what happened there. So I would say there's a lot of use cases and more pop up. That's the cool thing about about open source, is that we see more and more pop up of people using profiling in ways that we didn't even really expect when we started the project.
Mhm. Right. So I think all the points that you have told over here might ring the ears of corporates, because they care a lot about money and infrastructure setup. And yeah, that's a really good thing, that profiling can help people in cost cutting and revenue generation. Uh, what would you say a profile look like? What is a, if you say a CPU profile or a memory profile, then how would it look like? I set up a Pyroscope like a few days back, and in Pyroscope I see like
Uh-huh.
there are different like table and flame graph, and I think there is a sandwich view that you launched yourself as a Pyroscope, and there is a graph with view, so like a table. What are these views and how people can take advantage of this? I saw there is this demo Pyroscope IO online, where people can
Uh-huh.
go through and learn about that views, but how to read those views. Can you give some tips on that?
Yeah. So basically this is kind of what this is what a flame graph looks like, and how you read it is basically the top bar represents the total. In this case, we're looking at CPU time. So
Mhm.
this is showing CPU over time, and then inside of here we can actually see the CPU time per function. And so the total, this is 47 minutes that this was running, and you can see a breakdown here. This function calls the function beneath it, which calls the function beneath it, so on and so forth, until you get to this serve HTTP function, which actually calls three different functions, either bike, car, or scooter. So these are the different routes, and then you can see the stack trace that basically like follows beneath those. And so, the way you look at this and, read and understand this is that, if you needed to optimize this application in some way, you kind of start with the biggest node. So this one's consuming 71% of the CPU. And then you figure out, okay, should it be taking 71%? And if it is,
Right.
why is it taking that much? And you're able to kind of read the flame graph that way. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And when will people use like this different views? is there any particular use case that is more relevant for sandwich view that compared to flame graph, or
Yeah.
are they user specific that what user feels more comfortable with?
Yeah, so I mean, it just depends on your use case. So sandwich view is something. Shout out to Speedscope and
Mhm.
Jamie Wong, and who's the creator of that project, and that's where we kind of got the idea for sandwich view. But yeah,
Mhm.
basically, what it allows you to do is, so you can see here, sometimes it's easy to start with the biggest node and say, okay,
Mhm.
how can I make this specific function faster? But if
Right.
you want to
Right.
decrease like overall CPU time and decrease it,
Mhm.
sometimes there's a lot of nodes. So for example, here we see time.sense is called across multiple different nodes. So actually the easiest way to optimize CPU here might be to focus on this node that's spread out across your database instead of one
Right.
specific node that, shows up here. And so if we go like sandwich view and we select time.sense, basically what this
Mhm.
shows, it shows all the functions that call time.sense on the top,
Okay.
and then all the functions that time.sense calls on the bottom. And so, in this case, this is a pretty simple function. There's not much to optimize here, but a lot of times this ends up being something like logging, for example, which happens across your entire application, and you can use this to understand like who's calling a logging function and who does the logging function call, and how might you be able to optimize that.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
so
a great insight.
basically there's just there's a bunch of different ways that you can use the different views, again, that have sort of popped up over time as we've had the project, and people have kind of come to us and said like, hey, I like to read the flame graph this way or understand it,
Mhm.
use it for this use case. And so we kind of built those various views into it, and have a lot more, views coming up soon as well to improve that.
Right. So I would say that this the demo that you shown is the best way to like figure out how to optimize your application and how to go through different views. But would you say that in the profiling, whatever profiling solutions available right now, open source platforms, would you say that Pyroscope is the best one in the market? I would say that based on my experience. But what's your gut feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a little biased. I spent a lot of time working on it, me and the team, and so I definitely think so. Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's not like a ton of options out there for profiling, since it's
Mhm.
it's like a little bit newer, and I would say definitely Pyroscope was one of the earliest entrants, especially on the open source side of things. We have a lot of GitHub stars, whatever that means. But I mean, I think the real kind of test is like how much value that you're able to get from the various, profiling solutions that exist out there. And that was one of the biggest reasons that we actually decided to join Grafana, was we saw that a lot of our customers and users kept asking like, hey, I love Pyroscope, but I would really like to see it, alongside my other data, my logs, my metrics, my traces, and not have to go flip back and forth to a separate dashboard to be able to see that. And so I feel like Pyroscope, by us joining Grafana, we were able to kind of mesh the best of both worlds, where some people prefer to go the cloud route, where they just, they use Grafana Cloud, where Pyroscope is, in one of the stacks there, and they can use it there. Some people choose to go open source and use Pyroscope open source. And regardless of which way they're using it, now they can see all of their profiling data in one place, in one dashboard. And I think that is something that is unique to Pyroscope, that we have both of those paths and all of it in one platform. Some are open source, but they are sort of like a standalone profiler. Some are cloud, but there's no open source attached to it. And Pyroscope kind of meshes the best of those, and being able to provide really however you want to profile your data, a way that you can do it, pretty easily.
Right. Yeah. So I would suggest the same that as far as I've used Pyroscope in last 1 or 2 months, I have seen that it has the all the popular language support, the hotel integration that we'll talk about in a bit. Also, it
Yeah.
provides a storage if you go to the cloud solution. So I would say you will get all in one place if you want something for profiling. I will share some dashboards that I have created in the links in the video. But I would like to know that what is the core architecture of Pyroscope that allowed Pyroscope to be so scalable that you can use it into your Kubernetes cluster or uh, anywhere in your infrastructure so lightly that it does not affect your CPU or RAM usage, because people don't want to it to be costly to profile their application. So you have created a optimal architecture. I have seen some system designs and storage designs on the documentation, but maybe you
Mm.
can put some light onto it.
Yeah. So, there's a lot to cover there because there's a lot of components of Pyroscope to talk about. So I would say really there's like three main kind of areas that we think about when we think about Pyroscope and profiling. There's the clients or the SDKs, which sit on your application, send the data. There's the server itself, and then there's the UI.
Right.
So for the on the architecture side, basically how all of our profilers work on the client side is that we take essentially the most popular like the most popular open source profilers for the various languages, RB Spy for Ruby, PySpy for Python, Async Profiler for Java, pprof for Go. We take a lot of the basically, yeah, the most efficient profilers that exist in the open source world and basically adapt them to, send data in a standardized format, which I know we'll talk about the OTel stuff a little bit later. It's kind of the idea behind the OTel profiling efforts as well. But yeah, for now, we just standardize it into a format that the Pyroscope server understands and can optimize. I can give you a link to our like storage design docs where we use a bunch of like really fancy data structures, trees,
Right.
tries, all that kind of stuff to really compress the data a lot. But yeah, how the clients get the data to begin with is using sampling profilers. So it's incredibly low overhead, usually less than 5%, and yeah, you're able to kind of get this profiling data because it's looking at the stack trace at some interval. We default to like 100 times per second, and then collecting all that, pooling all that profiling data, and sending it off to the server in sort of like 10-second chunks. And that allows you to be able to go back in time and look at it, but basically do it without having to add too much overhead to your system in order to collect the data in the first place.
Right.
And so that's the client side. On the server side, it's a little bit more complicated because we're still in the process of merging Phlare and Pyroscope open source projects. The way I would just describe that is basically um, the Pyroscope open source project as it exists on June 25th, 2023. It will be likely merged in the next month with Phlare, but
Okay.
it basically is not horizontally scalable. So that was one of the biggest issues that we had with our open source project was that a lot of people started using it, but then when they hit a certain point, they had to kind of find different ways to like shard their data so that they could have 4 or 5 Pyroscope instances since it only scaled vertically but not horizontally.
Right.
Phlare works the same way as the other like Grafana databases, Loki, Tempo, Mimir, where it has a horizontally scalable architecture so that you can scale to however big, however much resources you're willing to throw at it. And so yeah, basically what we're doing right now is we're taking the that horizontally scalable component from Phlare, and the efficiency from Pyroscope, the compression and all that kind of stuff, merging those together. And then we will actually be, putting them all under the Pyroscope project, and then we'll deprecate the
Right.
Phlare project as the new, Pyroscope, as basically once we add that functionality over to the Pyroscope project. So it's a little bit confusing, kind of comes with the territory, but it's a small price to pay in the meantime of things being a little bit confusing for what will be a significantly more valuable both open source project. And right now, that's what we're running in Grafana Cloud. That merged version, we're kind of getting making sure we get all the bugs out, making sure we get the upgrade path correct. And so we're kind of testing it ourselves, and it's looking pretty exciting for how much better that's going to be for our open source community once we release that in the next month or so.
Right. Yeah, it is great that you are putting the best of both worlds, the Grafana and Pyroscope together, because I also had the same discussion on your Slack channel with your team members, and these guys were like really supportive, and they told me how what is the intermediate way to try out, because I was like eager to try out the Grafana and Pyroscope merged version together, and I was not ready to wait to get the release. So then I took the GitHub repo and I took the particular branch where the development was happening, and I built it myself. And the Pyroscope team helped me a lot to get that working. And yeah, I think after a month or two, the Pyroscope horizontal scalability and multi-tenancy will be at the best. So I was hoping for that. Cross my fingers.
Well, it's
And
coming soon. Yeah, we're working hard on getting it out for sure.
also, you said about there was some launch on the Grafana event the last time we talked about having this conversation. So how was that launch gone? What was that about?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean it's gone great. Basically, we launched Grafana Cloud profiles into public preview. Yeah, and again, like the biggest thing that we were trying to make sure is that we're really big on obviously like dog fooding, making sure that we use the stuff that we then give out to the community, and yeah, we just honestly wanted a lot more volume of data to make sure that yeah, that it does scale the way that we expect it to scale, and that we expect that our users will expect it to scale. And yeah, and so we released that. We've gotten a bunch of companies who either were using Pyroscope Cloud before, or already using Grafana Cloud in some way, and yeah, have started sending profiles and have started again using the various advantages of having Grafana and being able to build dashboards with profiling involved, or we have a new app plugin on the Grafana page that basically lets you kind of embeds what a lot of people already know as the Pyroscope UI into the Grafana dashboard. And then obviously the explore page, being able to kind of explore data as well. So we have a bunch of different ways now to view profiling data in the Grafana ecosystem. And yeah, and so we're getting a lot of good feedback, and a lot of good sort of stress testing to make sure that the scalability of this merged version of Pyroscope and Phlare is really as good as we say it is.
Expected to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Does Grafana Phlare team and your Pyroscope team come together and do all the work, or you as a Pyroscope team went into the Grafana Phlare and went through the documentation and code? How does this merging works? How you make that happen?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been honestly really great working with the what initially was the Flare team. Shout out to Cyril and Christian. But
Mhm.
yeah, the basically we had a similar roadmap, and that was the other reason that we thought joining Grafana made a lot of sense. In that what we wanted to do with profiling was like almost like spot on. If you look at the Pyroscope UI, it looks very similar to the Grafana UI already. Because yeah, we've always been really, inspired by kind of the mission that Grafana has there. And so, When it came to merging things, I mean, we merged the teams. The team is now one team that we call the Pyroscope team. The Pyroscope logo won out, so we kept the Pyroscope name. And so, yeah, I mean, we just kind of all we actually got the chance to all meet in person out where one of our teammates lives in France actually, and we just kind of like sat down the Pyroscope team and the Phlare team together, and we're like, we kind of mapped out what we wanted to do and how we wanted to logistically get through merging things. And then yeah, now we've just been kind of chipping away at it. We taught the Phlare team how Pyroscopes work. The Phlare team taught the Pyroscope team how Phlare and Loki, Tempo, Mimir worked. And once we kind of had a good understanding, yeah, we were able to figure out where there were duplicates of ideas or concepts or components. We were able to streamline those into one and figure out how to merge them. And now we're just kind of executing on that plan, which a big milestone was releasing this cloud profiles with the merged version. And then, yeah, the next biggest milestone will be Pyroscope 1.0, which will, again, represent this new sort of merged horizontally scalable version of Pyroscope, and kind of get the ball rolling on a lot of what we have planned for, even more further into the future stuff of new features and things that we really want to see happen in the profiling world. For example, linking, traces and profiles and things like that as we move forward. So yeah, basically we're just kind of executing now all as one team, and taking the best of both worlds wherever we can.
Right. So it's like a great effort from both the teams and a lot of knowledge transfer that is happening and a lot of patience from the developer of both the teams. So I hats off to both the teams. Another thing I was trying to highlight is that I try to join a lot of channels under the CNCF umbrella to just understand what is the latest open source projects going on. And I
Hmm.
work mostly around the OpenTelemetry things. So recently I joined the hotel profiling to see what progress have they done on the semantic conventions part for the profiling. And when I joined the channel and I scrolled up, then I saw your messages coming back again and again. So you were the most active guy over that channel. So would you say that in future they will be creating semantic conventions based on how Pyroscope is giving out the data, or is there any future plans for giving out these semantic conventions by your team or something like that? How will that go?
Yeah, I would definitely say yes. I am very chatty in that channel. Really, the hotel profiling efforts started at KubeCon. I believe that was back in Valencia, like last maybe May or something, or May of 2022, I think that was. And it kind of came as a lot of stuff in the open telemetry world does, as like they literally just at the community meeting took a vote, and they were like, what do people want to see in OTel in the next like couple of years? And and profiling support, official, an official standard for profiling, all that kind of stuff was, I think it was the number one voted on request from people. And so that
Right.
was really interesting. I again, kind of mentioned it earlier that profiling has just kind of blown up both in community interest as well as Pyroscope itself. And so yeah, we at the Pyroscope team, but not just us. There's Felix from Datadog. There's a bunch of people from Elastic. There's a bunch of people from Polar Signals. So it's definitely not just Pyroscope, but a lot of other profiling solutions that are out there also want to be a part of this open telemetry effort, and have been working really hard on finding ways. Oh yeah, Jonathan at Red Hat. There's a bunch of people in that channel. You can I definitely can't shout them all out, but yeah, who have helped us in really figuring out how can we figure out a solution that works for everybody, but makes kind of keeps the mission and the goals of open telemetry of being vendor neutral and making it easier for the community to get value from profiling. And so yeah, we've been working on that for a year. We've made a lot of progress. Right now, we are in a like prototyping phase, very close to making the official PR that will yeah, like actually take a first crack at what a new OpenTelemetry based profiling format would look like. And yeah, and so all those groups and more that I didn't mention have been working on making that happen. And assuming all goes well, it's obviously a big undertaking to get through the various committees and approvers and stuff within OpenTelemetry, but I think we've done a lot of the proper steps and research to make sure that we've come up with something that will be sort of a net positive to the OpenTelemetry ecosystem. And yeah, we're really excited to see how it is received by the community when we officially propose it and get it rolled out in the next hopefully by the end of this year, definitely, but hopefully even sooner.
Right. Also, I have seen some hotel tracing and profiling relations in your documentation. So it says that if you profile your applications in particularly in Go, Java, and Ruby, then you can map them with the traces. So what is that
Uh-huh.
about? Is it the start of this hotel profiling that we are talking, or is it a different approach altogether?
Yeah, so this, I would say, here, let me share. I can share kind of a little preview of what that looks like. Um,
Sure.
yeah, so this is kind of what the idea here, and something that we thought would be a really both from feedback from customers and open source users, basically being able to take a profile or take a trace span and get a profile per trace span. We call them exemplars. I don't know if that's the ultimate name that we'll land on in the open telemetry world, but basically here you see there's like a span in this Jaeger trace that's like, 3 seconds. And sometimes that's useful to know, but then sometimes you actually want to like drill down into that 3 seconds and say, what code was actually running. And so in this case, you'd be able to then see like, oh, okay, so, by linking this like profile ID with the span ID, you'd be able to say, this is the actual code that was running for that 3 seconds. And that's just a level of granularity that we think is going to be really sort of, transformational and make a big impact in the value people get from both profiles and traces, and kind of does that merging of signals that people don't want to see them all in various silos anymore, but want to see them all linked together in ways that are more beneficial. And so that was more of a kind of a proof of concept that we built out, as we were, trying to make the case for why profiling should be in the hotel world, because the only way you can do this linking, excuse me, the only way you can do this linking is by finding, if things are standardized in a way where, where you can expect that the trace ID will be where it is, that the span ID will be where it is, and that when you get the profile ID that those match. And so there's a lot that has to happen there on the standardization side to make sure that everything lines up properly. And so yeah, that's a lot of what one of the main goals of the profiling efforts currently is to like allow integrations like that will enhance the other signals too, and not just traces but logs and metrics as well.
Right. So the document that you just shared, I had a architecture level query over there. That if say I am profiling my Golang application, and I want to map my traces with the profiling, so I will also set up a Pyroscope server where my profiling will be stored, and I will also run a OpenTelemetry collector where I will store the tracing data. But that tracing data will have a URL which will be fetching data from the Pyroscope server itself, and then will be able to map those traces and profile, right?
Yep. That's pretty much the general idea for sure. Yeah, and be able to, um, there's some yeah, there's some extra pieces of you have to be able to do some dynamic labeling of profiles on the client side.
Mhm.
So, so that's one thing that it makes things harder in some languages than other languages. But yeah, but that's the general idea is being able to do exactly what you just said.
Right. So, is it also possible to make this happen in other languages, or are there some challenges to make this happen in other languages? Because it has been released in these three particular languages. So, any language-specific challenges over there?
Yeah, we kind of paused on because before we were sort of using the Pyroscope profiling format in order to do this and the Pyroscope architecture. And we decided, we were kind of going down the path, and the only reason we didn't add it for other languages is because we felt like it made more sense to work sort of community wide on standardizing things
Right.
rather than sort of making everything specific to Pyroscope. So right now, those integrations are specific, even though they're called OTel profiling. They're called
Mhm.
that because it's profiling attached to OTel traces. So it's a little bit of like
Mhm.
it could, I imagine it could get a little confusing. And so we just focused all of our efforts into the OTel profiling side of things to make sure that that everybody's able to benefit from this and not just Pyroscope.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of but yeah, there's nothing. I mean, I guess the biggest technical thing is, again, yeah, you have to be able to dynamically tag your applications, which is hard in some languages. But other than that, yeah, as long as you can, say profile with this label, you can then tie that label back however you need to in the end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. That would be really useful for people as well. And I would say that via all this conversation, people will know now that in the 1 or 2 months there is a merged version coming for Phlare and Pyroscope. Then people will expect the hotel profiling, and I think all these major changes will turn the way how we use the profiling and how we take leverage out of it. So Pyroscope is giving a lot of contributions in this particular direction, the profiling. And I'll keep in touch with Ryan on Slack to know what else is coming. And if any major updates coming down the road, then we'll have another conversation with Ryan on maybe this channel or somewhere else. But that was really insightful from your side.
Yeah, no problem.
Anything?
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback and yeah, and you helping us kind of get the word out there. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just yeah, like anybody who's watching this, like we'd love to hear your feedback on anything Pyroscope related, whether that's the open source side, whether that's cloud profiles, whether that's the open telemetry efforts that we're working on. All of those are only going to be made better by getting feedback from people. I think a lot of times people, I've worked on with open source projects before where I didn't feel like my input was particularly factored in or whatever. But I can say that's the one thing that we really pride ourselves on at Pyroscope is taking this community feedback and working it into the product and into the project. And yeah, and so I can guarantee you it will not go sort of unnoticed, and that we really appreciate it and hope that those keep on coming in. So thanks to everybody, and yeah, we'll obviously keep the community updated on our plans as we move forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan.